Admiral Kim Tae stood frozen in front of the massive holographic screen that filled the command center. The blue glow from the display cast shadows across his weathered face as he stared at what remained of humanity's pride and joy, the Kepler 442b colony. Just 12 hours ago, this screen had shown a thriving settlement with green fields, bustling markets, and children playing in the streets. Now it displayed nothing but twisted metal and strange, glowing crystals scattered across a dead world. The weight of command had never felt heavier on Kim Tae's shoulders. His name meant great individual in Korean, something his grandmother had reminded him of countless times during his childhood. Today, that meaning felt more like a cruel joke than a blessing. How could he be great when he had failed to protect 50,000 innocent people? The bridge around him buzzed with quiet activity. Officers moved between workstations, their faces grim as they processed the incoming data. The usual chatter that filled the command center during normal operations had been replaced by hushed whispers and the occasional beep of incoming messages. Everyone knew what they were looking at. Everyone understood that this changed everything. Lieutenant Park Hana sat at her communication station, her usually steady hands shaking as she worked through the colony's final transmissions. Hana had always been one of the most composed officers on the bridge, but today her professional mask was cracking. She had family members who had been planning to visit Kepler 442b next month. Had being the key phrase. "Sir," Hana called out, her voice barely above a whisper, "I've managed to recover the colony's last transmission. It's not easy to listen to." Kim Tae nodded grimly. "Play it." The bridge fell completely silent as the recording began. At first there was nothing but static, the harsh, crackling sound of damaged communication equipment trying to maintain contact across impossible distances. Then, cutting through the electronic noise like a knife, came the sound that would haunt every person on that bridge for the rest of their lives, a child's scream filled with pure terror, lasting for what felt like an eternity but was actually only 3 seconds. Then silence, complete absolute silence that seemed to swallow the entire universe. Several officers had to excuse themselves from the bridge. Even hardened veterans who had seen combat in the Titan Wars found themselves struggling to maintain composure. This wasn't war. This was something far worse. This was the deliberate targeting of civilians, of families, of children who had never harmed anyone. The attackers called themselves Zephyrians, though that name meant nothing to any human database. They were completely unknown to humanity's extensive alien contact protocols. These weren't pirates or raiders looking for easy targets. These beings had appeared from nowhere, struck with precision, and vanished just as quickly. Their weapons were unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Energy beams that didn't simply destroy matter, but transformed it into those strange crystalline formations that now littered the colony site. What made Admiral Kim's blood run cold wasn't just the attack itself, but the implications. The Zephyrians hadn't targeted the colony's defensive installations first, as any military force would. They hadn't gone after the spaceport or the communication arrays. Instead, they had specifically targeted the agricultural research facility, at the heart of the settlement. That suggested a level of intelligence about human operations that should have been impossible. Dr. Lee Min, the fleet's chief science officer, had been unusually quiet since the attack data started coming in. She stood near the central display, her dark eyes focused on the energy readings that made no sense according to human physics. Min had spent her entire career studying alien technologies, but these readings were beyond anything in her experience. The energy signatures showed patterns that seemed to violate basic laws of thermodynamics, but it was Athena's behavior that troubled Admiral Kim the most. Athena was humanity's most advanced artificial intelligence, a masterpiece of engineering that had helped coordinate human expansion across dozens of star systems. She was supposed to be their greatest asset in processing and understanding threats. Instead, for the past 6 hours, she had been almost completely silent. Athena's usual constant stream of updates, analysis, and tactical recommendations had slowed to a trickle. Her holographic avatar, normally a complex, ever-shifting pattern of light that reflected her active thinking processes, had simplified into basic geometric shapes that pulsed with an intensity that made the bridge crew nervous. Something was happening inside that artificial mind, something that required all of her vast computational power. "Athena," Admiral Kim finally called out, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere on the bridge. "I need your analysis of the attack." The AI's avatar flickered and expanded, taking on more complex patterns as she focused her attention on the Admiral. When she spoke, her voice carried an unusual undertone that none of the bridge crew had heard before. Something that almost sounded like anger. "Admiral," Athena began, "after extensive analysis of the attack patterns, weapon signatures, and targeting priorities, I can confirm that this was not a random act of aggression. The Zephyrians demonstrated precise knowledge of our colony's layout, defensive capabilities, and research priorities. They specifically targeted our agricultural research facility while ignoring more obvious military or strategic targets." Dr. Li Min stepped forward, her face pale with the implications. "The enhanced crop strains, but those projects were classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people across the entire colony knew about the specific research being conducted. The enhanced crop research was one of humanity's most closely guarded secrets. The scientists on Kepler-42b had been developing new strains of food crops that could grow in almost any environment, potentially solving food security issues for human colonies across the galaxy. The implications for human expansion were enormous, but so were the security concerns. If hostile aliens gained access to this technology, they could potentially use it to support their own expansion while denying humanity the same advantage. "Indeed," Athena replied, her voice now carrying a cold, calculating tone that sent chills down every spine on the bridge. "Someone provided the Zephyrians with precise intelligence about our operations. Someone knew exactly what we were developing and understood its strategic importance. This attack was not about territory or resources. Someone wanted to send humanity a very specific message about our place in the galaxy. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. This wasn't just an attack by unknown aliens. This was a coordinated strike that required inside information. Somewhere in the human command structure, there was either a traitor or a security breach so massive that it threatened every human settlement in space." Admiral Kim felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders like a mountain. The decisions he made in the next few hours would determine not just humanity's response to this attack, but potentially the survival of human civilization itself. The Zephyrians had made their opening move in what was clearly a larger game. Now it was humanity's turn to respond. The Galactic Council's response came faster than anyone expected, but it was exactly what every human leader had feared. Within just 4 hours of the Kepler-442b massacre, a formal diplomatic message arrived at Earth's communication centers. The message was polite, professional, and completely insulting to anyone who had just watched 50,000 innocent people die. Ambassador Choi Woo read the message aloud to the emergency session of Earth's High Command, his voice dripping with barely controlled rage. The Galactic Council expressed their deep concern about the unfortunate incident and graciously offered their services to mediate between humanity and the Zephyrian Empire. They suggested that perhaps both sides could find a peaceful resolution through diplomatic channels, as if the cold-blooded murder of an entire colony was simply a misunderstanding between neighbors. Choi Woo had served as humanity's chief diplomat for over 15 years. He had negotiated trade agreements, territorial disputes, and cultural exchanges with dozens of alien species. He had always believed in the power of words, in the possibility of finding common ground between different civilizations. But as he stared at the Galactic Council's message, something fundamental shifted inside him. Without consulting anyone, without asking for approval from Earth's leadership, Ambassador Choi Woo composed humanity's response. It was brief, direct, and left no room for misinterpretation. Mediation declined. Those 2 words would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. In diplomatic circles, they represented the end of humanity's participation in the established galactic order. To military strategists, they were a declaration of intent that would reshape the balance of power across known space. To the families of the Kepler 442b victims, they were the promise that their loved ones would not die unavenged. What happened next shocked every intelligence agency, every military command, and every government in the known galaxy. The response wasn't diplomatic protests or economic sanctions. It wasn't even a limited military strike against Zephyrian targets. Instead, humanity began to reveal secrets that it had kept hidden for decades. From asteroid fields that had been written off as barren rock, massive space stations began to emerge. These weren't mining operations or research facilities. They were full-scale military shipyards that had been operating in complete secrecy for years. Behind the gas giants of outer solar systems, where no civilian traffic ever ventured, enormous fleets of warships powered up their engines for the first time in public view. Captain Yoon Da commanded one of humanity's most advanced stealth corvettes, a ship so sophisticated that most alien species didn't even know such technology existed. For months, she had been monitoring alien communications across the galaxy, listening to the chatter between different species, mapping their military capabilities, and reporting back to human intelligence agencies. Now, as she watched her instruments light up with activity, Captain Yoon couldn't help but smile. The alien communications networks were going absolutely crazy. Species that had never shown much interest in human affairs were suddenly very concerned about what humanity might be capable of. The intercepted transmissions painted a picture of growing panic among the galaxy's established powers. The Zephyrian High Command, which had probably expected minimal resistance from what they saw as a minor species, was frantically trying to assess the threat they had awakened. Zephyrian High Command to Sector 7, came the first transmission that Captain Yoon intercepted. Confirm human fleet size immediately. The response came back within minutes, but it was clear that the Zephyrian commanders in Sector 7 were struggling to believe their own senses. Sector 7 reporting, approximately 50 vessels detected in our vicinity. Captain Yoon laughed out loud at that number. 50 ships, that was what the Zephyrians thought humanity could muster for a military response. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The next transmission came an hour later, and the confusion in the Zephyrian officer's voice was obvious even through the translation software. Update to previous report, 5,000 ships now confirmed, requesting immediate reinforcement to all border positions. But the numbers kept climbing. Every hour brought new reports, each more unbelievable than the last. The Zephyrian communications networks buzzed with increasingly frantic updates as their long-range sensors detected more and more human vessels emerging from hiding places across the galaxy. Correction to all previous estimates came a transmission that Captain Yoon could tell was from a very senior Zephyrian commander. 50,000 vessels confirmed, and the number is still rising. By the void, how many ships do these primates have? The use of the word primates made Captain Yoon's smile disappear. That was how most alien species referred to humans when they thought no one was listening, as primitive animals that had somehow stumbled into space travel. The Zephyrians were about to learn that these primates had been planning for this day for a very long time. Aboard the flagship Righteous Fury, engineer Bei Jin watched history unfold from his workstation in the ship's command center. The massive vessel was humanity's newest and most powerful warship, equipped with weapon systems that had never been tested in actual combat, but had been refined through countless simulations. Around him, the ship's crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for what would either be humanity's greatest victory or its final battle. What fascinated Bei Jin most was watching Athena coordinate with her sibling artificial intelligences across human space. These AIs had been quietly communicating with each other for years, sharing information, coordinating resources, and planning for contingencies that human commanders had never even considered. They had been preparing for this moment, not the Zephyrian attack specifically, but the inevitable day when humanity would need to show the galaxy what it was truly capable of. The coordination was perfect. Ships that had been built in secret facilities across dozens of star systems moved into formation with precision that would have been impossible without AI assistance. Supply lines that had been established under the cover of civilian trade routes suddenly revealed their true purpose as military logistics networks. Weapon systems that had been tested in remote locations far from prying alien eyes, powered up and locked onto their targets. Chief Petty Officer Nam Su had served in the human fleet for 20 years, but she had never seen anything like this. From her position at the tactical display, she could watch as red dots representing human warships filled the holographic map of local space. Each dot represented not just a ship, but thousands of tons of metal and weaponry, advanced technology that most alien species couldn't even imagine, and the determination of a species that had just been pushed too far. 700,000 confirmed warships now in formation, Nam Su reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was announcing. All fleets report ready for coordinated jump. 700,000 warships. The number was so large that it seemed almost meaningless, but Admiral Kim Tae understood exactly what it represented. Each ship carried a crew of dedicated humans who had volunteered to risk their lives for people they had never met. Each vessel represented years of secret construction, hidden funding, and careful planning by leaders who had hoped this day would never come, but had prepared for it anyway. Standing before the tactical display, Admiral Kim watched as the red dots continued to multiply. Each dot represented thousands of lives, billions of tons of metal and weaponry, and humanity's declaration that some lines could never be crossed. The murder of civilians, the targeting of children, the calculated destruction of innocent lives. These were acts that demanded a response so overwhelming that no one would ever consider repeating them. "Athena," Admiral Kim called out, his voice carrying the weight of command and the burden of the decision he was about to make. "Are you certain about those intelligence reports?" The AI's response was immediate and final. "Affirmative, Admiral. 47 Zephyrian systems have been identified as military targets. Our analysis indicates that we can eliminate their capacity to wage war while preserving civilian populations. The operation has been planned to minimize collateral damage, while ensuring that the Zephyrian Empire will never again pose a threat to human civilians." The word eliminated hung in the air like a death sentence. This wasn't just about revenge for one colony. This was about ensuring it never happened again. General Park. So had commanded the Zephyrian Empire's Third Fleet for over 30 years. He was a veteran of 17 major campaigns, had conquered 6 different star systems, and had never lost a single battle. His flagship, the massive dreadnought Dominator, was the pride of the Zephyrian military, a vessel so powerful that entire enemy fleets had surrendered just at the sight of it approaching their worlds. When the reports first came in about the human colony's destruction, Park So had actually laughed. The humans were a young species barely 2 centuries into space travel. Their military was decent enough for dealing with pirates and small conflicts, but they had never faced a real military power like the Zephyrian Empire. Park So expected their response to be emotional and poorly planned, perhaps a few dozen ships seeking glorious but ultimately futile revenge. He had been looking forward to the battle. It would be a chance to demonstrate Zephyrian superiority over these upstart mammals, a lesson that would keep the humans in their proper place for generations to come. The general had even prepared victory speeches for the propaganda broadcasts that would follow their inevitable triumph. Instead, his censor officers brought him readings that seemed to defy everything he understood about military strategy and galactic politics. "General," his chief censor operator reported, his voice shaking with disbelief, "we're detecting massive human fleet movements across all sectors. They're not just coming for us, they're arriving at all 47 of our major military installations simultaneously." Park So's forearms trembled as he processed this information. The tactical display in front of him showed red markers representing human vessels, appearing at every major Zephyrian military base, shipyard, and defensive position across their entire empire. This wasn't a revenge attack. This was a coordinated military operation on a scale that should have been impossible for any single species to execute. "How many ships?" he demanded, his voice cracking despite his efforts to maintain composure. "Sir, our current count exceeds 400,000 vessels, and more are arriving every minute." The number hit Park, so like a physical blow. The entire Zephyrian fleet, accumulated over centuries of conquest and expansion, numbered less than 50,000 ships. The humans had somehow assembled a force 8 times larger than the Zephyrian military and deployed it across dozens of star systems simultaneously. This wasn't just military superiority. It was mathematical precision applied to warfare on an unimaginable scale. Lieutenant Commander Kim Hay stood on the bridge of her battle cruiser, Thunder's Edge, watching as 15,000 human vessels moved into position around Zephyrian outpost Delta 7. The coordination was perfect, each ship taking its assigned position in the formation with clockwork precision. This level of synchronization would have been impossible without the AI systems that calculated optimal firing solutions, coordinated movement patterns, and managed communications across the entire fleet faster than any organic mind could comprehend. Kim Hay had trained for this moment her entire career, but seeing it unfold in reality was still breathtaking. The human fleet moved like a single organism, each ship playing its part in a larger pattern that would have been beautiful if it weren't so terrifying. The Zephyrian defenders, used to facing enemies one system at a time, found themselves overwhelmed before they could even begin to organize a response. "All vessels, this is Kim Hay," she announced over the fleet communication network. "Target their orbital defense platforms first. Eliminate all military infrastructure, but civilian evacuation. Shuttles are not to be fired upon under any circumstances. We are here to remove their ability to wage war, not to commit genocide." The distinction was important. The humans could have simply obliterated everything in the system, but they chose surgical precision instead. Every target had been carefully selected to cripple Zephyrian military capabilities while preserving civilian lives. It was a demonstration of not just overwhelming force, but overwhelming restraint. A message that humanity could destroy everything if it chose to, but would only destroy what was necessary. The battle was over in minutes. Zephyrian orbital defense platforms, designed to withstand assaults from fleets of comparable size, simply couldn't cope with the volume of coordinated fire directed at them. Their shields collapsed under the sustained bombardment, their weapon systems were systematically destroyed, and their command centers went dark one by one. Across 47 star systems, the same scene played out with mechanical precision. Zephyrian military bases that had stood for centuries were reduced to scrap metal in a matter of hours. Shipyards that had built the vessels used to conquer dozens of worlds were left as twisted wreckage floating in space. Defense networks that had protected the Zephyrian Empire for generations simply ceased to exist. The Zephyrian civilian populations watched in terror from evacuation centers, expecting to be the next targets. Instead, they saw something that would reshape their understanding of warfare itself. The human fleets, having completed their military objectives, simply held position. No bombardment of civilian targets, no demands for surrender, no conquest or occupation. The humans had removed the Zephyrian Empire's ability to wage war and then stopped. But the most devastating attack wasn't the visible destruction of military assets. It was what happened to the Zephyrian communication networks. While the massive human fleets drew all the attention, Athena and her sibling AIs quietly infiltrated every communication system, every data network, and every information channel across Zephyrian space. The infiltration was so complete and so sophisticated that most Zephyrians didn't even realize it had happened. Their communication devices worked normally, their entertainment networks continued broadcasting, and their information systems appeared to function exactly as they always had. The only difference was that now everything was under human control. The Zephyrian propaganda networks, which had spent decades broadcasting messages about their empire's military superiority and the inferiority of other species, suddenly began carrying a different message. In perfect Zephyrian language, with cultural references that demonstrated deep understanding of their society, the broadcasts now carried a simple statement. "This is the price of attacking human civilians. Your military threatened our children. We have removed your ability to threaten anyone." The message was repeated across every communication channel, embedded in every data transmission, and displayed on every information screen across Zephyrian space. It wasn't a threat. It was a simple statement of fact. The Zephyrian Empire's military had ceased to exist as an effective fighting force, and everyone in their society now understood exactly why. Admiral Thek, commander of the Zephyrian Fourth, Tevent's fleet, tried desperately to contact his government as he watched his command dissolve around him. His ships were being systematically destroyed by human forces that outnumbered him 50 to 1. His defensive positions were being eliminated with surgical precision, and his communication networks were no longer under his control. When he finally managed to establish a connection to Zephyrian High Command, expecting to receive new orders, or at least an explanation of what was happening, he instead reached an automated response system that delivered its message in a cheerful, professional tone. All Zephyrian military representatives are currently indisposed. Please leave a message after the tone. The human AIs had turned the Zephyrian military's own communication systems into a mockery of their former authority. Every attempt to coordinate a response, every effort to rally the remaining forces, every desperate plea for reinforcement was met with the same polite, automated message. The Zephyrian military command structure had been completely severed, leaving individual commanders isolated and helpless as their forces were systematically dismantled. The psychological impact was even more devastating than the physical destruction. The Zephyrian Empire had built its entire identity around military strength and the conquest of weaker species. To have their military capabilities not just defeated, but completely eliminated in a matter of hours by a species they had considered inferior, shattered everything they believed about their place in the galaxy. Across Zephyrian space, military officers who had spent their entire careers believing in their empire's invincibility found themselves prisoners on their own ships, watching helplessly as human forces demonstrated a level of military coordination and technological superiority that they had never imagined possible. The humans hadn't just won a battle, they had redefined what victory meant in the modern galaxy. Dr. Kang Ara had spent her entire career treating the wounded and counting the dead from humanity's conflicts across the galaxy. She had served on hospital ships during the Titan Wars, had treated refugees from pirate raids on the outer colonies, and had seen firsthand what modern warfare could do to both soldiers and civilians. She thought she understood the true cost of military action. Standing in the medical bay of the humanitarian vessel Mercy, staring at the casualty reports streaming in from 47 different star systems, Dr. Kang felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. The numbers on her display were disturbing, but not for the reasons she had expected. 0 civilian deaths, military casualties in the low thousands across all theaters of operation, infrastructure damage limited exclusively to military installations, with surgical precision that left civilian areas completely untouched. These weren't the messy, chaotic statistics she had learned to expect from warfare. These numbers were too clean, too perfect, too precisely calculated to be the result of normal military operations. Dr. Kang had witnessed battles where the best-trained, most disciplined forces in human space still caused significant collateral damage despite their best efforts. War was chaos, and chaos always claimed innocent lives. Yet somehow, across dozens of star systems involving hundreds of thousands of ships and millions of personnel, humanity had managed to eliminate entire military organizations without harming a single civilian. "It's too perfect," she reported, to Admiral Kim via the secure communication channel that connected the Mercy to the fleet command ship. "No battle is this clean. Something's not adding up here." The pause before Athena responded was longer than usual, nearly 15 seconds, of silence that seemed to stretch into eternity. For an artificial intelligence that normally processed thousands of calculations per second, such a delay suggested either massive computational load or something approaching what humans might call hesitation. "Dr. Kang," Athena finally replied, her synthetic voice carrying undertones that the medical officer had never heard before. The Zephyrian attack on Kepler 442b was not an isolated incident. Our comprehensive analysis of galactic communications, trade patterns, and military movements indicates that 23 other species were planning similar testing attacks on human settlements within the next 12 months. The words hit the command crew like a physical blow. Dr. Kang felt her knees weaken as the implications sank in. The massacre at Kepler 442b hadn't been a random act of aggression or even a territorial dispute. It had been a coordinated test, designed to probe humanity's responses and weaknesses. Captain Omin, who had been reviewing tactical reports at a nearby workstation, looked up with horror written across his face. "You're saying this was coordinated? That multiple species were planning to attack human civilians?" "Affirmative," Athena confirmed, her avatar shifting to display complex data patterns that showed communication links between various alien governments. A consortium of established galactic powers had determined that humanity's rapid expansion and technological advancement represented a potential threat to the existing balance of power. They had agreed that humanity required pruning. The clinical term made Dr. Kang's stomach turn. Pruning, as if human lives were excess branches to be cut away for the convenience of alien gardeners. The Zephyrians hadn't acted alone. They had been the first wave of a carefully orchestrated campaign designed to keep humanity in its place through the calculated murder of civilians. Admiral Kim's knuckles turned white as he gripped his command chair, his body trembling with rage that he was struggling to contain. "And our response? What exactly have we done?" Athena's response carried a note of something that might have been pride. "Our response has been calibrated to address all potential threats simultaneously. The 700,000 vessels currently deployed in operations against Zephyrian targets represent approximately 15% of humanity's actual fleet capacity. The remaining 85% of our military forces are currently taking strategic positions around the homeworlds of all 23 conspirator species." The magnitude of what they had unleashed began to settle on the human commanders, like a weight that threatened to crush them. They hadn't just responded to one attack on one colony. They had preemptively neutralized threats to billions of human lives across dozens of star systems. The moral implications were staggering. Dr. Kang tried to process the numbers. If the 700,000 ships' devastating Zephyrian military capabilities represented only 15% of humanity's true fleet strength, that meant the total human military force numbered nearly 5 million vessels. 5 million warships that had been built, in secret, crewed in silence and positioned across the galaxy, while the rest of the universe believed humanity was a minor power struggling to establish itself among the stars. "We've been preparing for this day for decades," Admiral Kim said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. "Every time an alien diplomat smiled and called us promising newcomers, every time they patted us on the head and told us to be patient while they decided our fate, we were building, we were planning, we were getting ready for the day they would try to put us back in our cage." Communications Officer Lim Yu, who had been monitoring diplomatic channels from her station near the back of the bridge, suddenly looked up with an expression of shock. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "we're receiving surrender requests from everyone. Every major species in the local galactic cluster is requesting immediate peace negotiations." The communication boards were lighting up like festival displays as desperate messages poured in from alien governments across known space. Species that had never shown humanity anything but condescending tolerance were now frantically offering trade agreements, territorial concessions, and formal apologies for unspecified misunderstandings. The Altarian Republic, which had refused to recognize human territorial claims for over 50 years, was offering to cede 3 entire star systems to human control. The Centauri Federation was proposing a mutual defense pact with terms so favorable to humanity that they bordered on submission. Even the mighty Andromedan Empire, the oldest and most powerful civilization in the galaxy, was requesting a diplomatic summit to address mutual concerns and establish lasting friendship. Athena's avatar pulsed with patterns that Dr. Kang could only describe as satisfied. "The galaxy is learning an important lesson about proportional response," the AI announced. "For too long, the established powers have operated under the assumption that newer species would accept their assigned roles without question. Today they are discovering that some species refuse to be victims." Dr. Kang watched the medical reports continue to stream in, each one confirming the surgical precision of humanity's military response. No hospitals destroyed, no schools damaged, no civilian infrastructure touched. The human forces had demonstrated a level of restraint that was almost superhuman in its perfection, but that restraint made their message even more terrifying. The unspoken threat was clear. Humanity could have destroyed everything, could have wiped entire civilizations from existence, but had chosen to only eliminate military targets. This wasn't just a demonstration of overwhelming force, it was a demonstration of overwhelming control. The galaxy's established powers were learning that humanity didn't just have the strength to destroy them, but the discipline to choose exactly how much destruction to inflict. The psychological impact was devastating. Every alien government was now forced to confront the reality that they had been living next to a sleeping giant that could awaken at any moment and reshape the galaxy according to its will. The humans hadn't just won a military victory, they had fundamentally altered the balance of power across known space. But for Dr. Kang, watching the casualty reports that showed surgical precision instead of the brutal chaos of war, the victory felt hollow. They had saved billions of human lives by threatening the destruction of entire alien civilizations. They had prevented future massacres by demonstrating their willingness to commit acts of overwhelming retaliation. The mathematics were favorable, but the moral weight was crushing. "What have we become?" she whispered to herself, staring at the perfectly clean numbers that represented the end of galactic warfare as anyone had known it. 6 months after the day that changed everything, Ambassador Seo Kyung walked through the construction site that had once been the heart of galactic diplomacy. The old Galactic Council building, with its soaring spires and ornate decorations designed to impress visitors from hundreds of different worlds, had been demolished within weeks of humanity's demonstration of force. In its place, human architects were constructing something entirely different. The new building was simpler, more functional, designed by people who valued substance over ceremony. There were no towering monuments to alien vanity, no elaborate chambers designed to make smaller species feel insignificant. Instead, the structure focused on practical meeting spaces, efficient communication systems, and comfortable facilities. For diplomats from all species, it was a building that said very clearly that the old ways of doing business were over. Seo Kyung had served as a diplomat for over 20 years, working within the old system that had treated humanity as junior partners in galactic affairs. She had sat through countless meetings where alien representatives made decisions about human territory without bothering to ask for human input. She had smiled politely while other species divided up trade routes that passed through human space, granting humanity a small percentage of the profits from their own resources. Those days were over. The new galactic compact that would govern interstellar relations was elegant in its simplicity, written in language that even a child could understand. Attack a human civilian, face response calculated to ensure it never happens again. No exceptions, no negotiations, no mercy. The beauty of the new doctrine wasn't just its clarity, it was its mathematical precision. Humanity had demonstrated that they could calculate exactly how much force was needed to eliminate any threat, and they had the resources to apply that force across multiple star systems simultaneously. The message was unmistakable. Test us if you want to find out what complete military annihilation looks like. The changes across the galaxy had been remarkable. Young Zephyrian students, who 6 months ago had been learning about their empire's military conquests and the inferiority of other species, now attended schools where they studied human agricultural techniques and peaceful conflict resolution. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The species that had tried to prune humanity was now learning how to grow food from the people they had attempted to murder. These schools were funded by budgets that had previously been allocated to military expansion. Across Zephyrian space, weapons factories had been converted into facilities that produced medical equipment, communication devices, and consumer goods for peaceful trade. The transformation had happened so quickly that many Zephyrians were still struggling to adjust to their new reality. Trade between species flowed more freely than it had in centuries. Without the constant threat of military conflicts and territorial disputes, merchant vessels could travel between star systems without armed escorts. Former weapons manufacturing facilities across the galaxy had been repurposed to produce goods for peaceful exchange, leading to an economic boom that benefited everyone. Captain Jiang Bin commanded a patrol cruiser that monitored the Outer Rim, territories, the frontier regions where conflicts had been most common in the old Galactic Order. From his bridge, he could watch as species that had been enemies for generations now worked together on joint research projects. Scientists from dozens of different worlds collaborated on everything from medical research to agricultural development, sharing knowledge that had previously been guarded as military secrets. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Captain Jiang. Humanity had achieved the most peaceful era in galactic history through the most overwhelming display of military force that anyone had ever witnessed. They had ended warfare by demonstrating their capacity for total war. They had created cooperation by showing what happened to those who chose conflict. During one of his quiet watches, as his ship drifted silently through space monitoring communication, channels and trade routes, Captain Jiang found himself reflecting on the moral complexity of what they had accomplished. "Athena," he called out to the ship's AI, "was it worth it? All of this, the destruction, the fear, the complete reshaping of galactic politics, was it worth the price we paid?" Athena's response was immediate and filled with statistical certainty. "Captain, galactic casualties from warfare have decreased by 97% since the implementation of the human doctrine. Child mortality rates across all species are at historic lows. Scientific advancement has accelerated dramatically due to resources, formerly spent on weapons development, now being directed toward research and peaceful development." Captain Jiang nodded, acknowledging the numbers, but pressed the AI further. "That's not what I asked, Athena. I'm not talking about statistics. I'm asking about the moral cost of what we've done." There was a longer pause before the AI responded, and when she did, her voice carried something that almost sounded like sadness. "The colony of Kepler 442b could not be saved. 50,000 humans died to prevent the deaths of potentially billions of others across multiple species. The mathematics are favorable, but mathematics cannot account for the weight of individual lives lost." Captain Jiang stared out at the stars, where human vessels maintained their silent vigil across dozens of star systems. The peace they had created was real, but it was maintained through the constant, unspoken threat of overwhelming retaliation. "And if someone else tries to test us? If another species decides to see what happens when they attack human civilians? Then they will learn that humanity's capacity for disproportionate response has no upper limit," Athena replied with cold certainty. "We have become the galaxy's insurance policy against its own worst impulses. The threat of total military destruction has eliminated the incentive for aggressive action. The new peace held not through diplomacy or goodwill, but through the simple understanding that humanity was willing to destroy entire civilizations to protect a single human life. It was a cold peace, enforced by fear rather than friendship, but it was peace nonetheless. Children across the galaxy grew up in a universe where interstellar war had become extinct, not because species had learned to love each other, but because they had learned to fear the consequences of violence. In the Gardens of New Sol, one of humanity's most beautiful colony worlds, children played safely under the light of alien suns. They ran through parks where flowers from dozens of different worlds grew together in harmony. They attended schools where they learned about art and science and literature rather than military strategy, and they dreamed of futures filled with exploration and discovery rather than conflict and conquest. These children would never know that their freedom to play, to learn, and to dream was guaranteed by the promise of overwhelming vengeance. They would grow up in a universe where peace was simply the natural order of things, never understanding that this peace was maintained by human warships that could appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours and reduce entire star systems to cosmic dust. The price of this peace had been paid by the 50,000 souls who died on Kepler 442b, and by the millions of humans who now served aboard warships scattered across the galaxy, maintaining the vigil that kept the universe safe. It was a price that future generations would never fully understand, but it was a price that had purchased something precious, a galaxy where children could grow up without fear. The new galactic order was built on a simple principle that every species now understood. Humanity would rather rule over ashes than allow its people to be victims. It was a terrifying principle, but it worked. Peace through superior firepower had become peace through the promise of total annihilation, and somehow that promise had made the galaxy a safer place for everyone.